recently at one of the funeral homes called me and asked me to preside at a service there at the funeral home for a man that I did not know, or he wasn't a parishioner. I get a lot of calls like that to do funeral rites at the funeral homes in the area. And sometimes I don't have a lot of information on the person, and I didn't have anything on this particular man. But when I arrived at the funeral, one of his sons said that his dad, the deceased, was very, very close to the grandchildren, that they had 7 kids. This couple had 7 kids, and Grandpa, he just did everything for them. They just adored him. He took them to school every day, and being that there were 7 of them, ages from like 20 all the way down to 6, I mean, he was really busy just carting them around. He would go to their games. You know, he just did everything for them, take them fishing, to the park, you name it. The movies, he was their go-to grandpa. And of course, Grandpa's wife had died a number of years ago. So he just loved filling his time with these kids. Well, anyway, when I get there, the son says to me, you know, these kids were so close to Grandpa. Would it be okay if each of them came up and said a few words? And I said, oh, that would be so great. Yeah, that would be so wonderful. So after I was done with my small eulogy, I invited the 7 kids up. And they ranged, like I said, from like 20 to 7 or 6, maybe 5. And they all stood, I don't know if they rehearsed this or what, but it was so cool. They all stood by age. So there was like this, you know, from the 20-year-old all the way down to this little tiny one. And they just got up there and they just poured out their hearts about how important Grandpa was to them, how much they loved him. But then here's the best part, We got to the little girl. She was probably maybe 6 or 7. And she got all teary-eyed and, you know, kind of whimpering a little bit. And she says, this is all she said, "Who's going to teach me to drive?" Oh my gosh, you know, the whole place just melted when she did that. You know, I was thinking the children who lost their lives, Uvalde, Texas, you know, they'll never have a grandpa to teach them to drive. How imaginably hard it must be for those parents, you know, to say goodbye this week as their funerals will soon begin, those precious children. How hard it is for us, you know, to say goodbye to our loved ones. We've all had that experience, you know. And those kids at that grandpa's funeral with all their heartache and pain, can you imagine, though, years to come, maybe 10 years, 20 years, when they're parents themselves, they'll cherish that time they had with their grandpa. It'll probably, for sure, give them more wisdom and make them better people because of the love that Grandpa showed them. That's how life is, you know. Friends move on, children grow up and leave home. They go off to college or wherever. You know, our men, our boys go off to war. Loved ones die. And goodbyes are seldom pleasant. You know, they're so bittersweet. And for the person of faith, goodbyes are not the end. Farewells can hold a promise of new encounters, newer and brighter beginnings, memorable reunions and anniversaries, legacies like Grandpa's, you know, to last the children for a lifetime. The ascension of our Lord is a powerful reminder of that. Jesus knew the price of goodbyes. He knew the ache of letting go, the hurt, the emptiness that comes from being left behind. You know, he had that experience. He left his home in Nazareth, you know, maybe sheltered by his mother and father, being a single child, learning his dad's craft, and he hit the road for 3 years. You know, the gospel says the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So he understood that goodbye. And during that time in the life of Christ, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to be open to deep, abiding friendships, to love and care for others, to risk, and know the price of love. And you all know, when love first starts out, oh man, it's just like, you can't get enough of each other. It's so wonderful. But it always comes to that bitter reality that we have to say goodbye. That's the risk of loving, isn't it? But we'd never trade it for anything else, would we? It's interesting in this account of the Ascension. There's actually 3 accounts of the Ascension, 2 the Gospels covered, and then the Acts that Brian read to us, that Jesus chose to go to Bethany. Bethany is just a few miles east of Jerusalem. It's just like 15 minutes by car. But he chose to go there to ascend into heaven. And the reason he chose that place is because that is the home of his closest friends, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. 3 times in the Gospels, Jesus goes to Bethany to be with them. It's a side of Jesus we often don't see in the Gospels. It's his private side where they dote on him and they fuss around him and they cook for him. And, he's at home there. And he goes there because Jesus knew the sadness of loss. That's where he wept for Lazarus. He wept for Lazarus. And you say to yourself, well, why did he weep for Lazarus? He knew in the back of his mind that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. It's because Jesus always enters the moment. He's always there to grieve with those who grieve, to weep with those who weep, and just enter that and be part of our own suffering. Jesus knew that pain. He knew the pain of goodbye. So his ascension was necessary for the mission of the church to carry on, and for his disciples and us to know that there's something beyond this world, something beyond pain and hurt and loss and war and massacres that's in store for those who believe. And Father and I were talking about this. The greatest challenge of a minister is to find words of hope and healing during tragedy, especially young people who die. I just can't imagine what it's like now for those ministers down there in Uvalde. We're called to be present. Oftentimes, when I do funerals at calling hours, people come in all anxious. What do I say? What should I do? I said, don't say anything. Just be there. Just give them a hug. Your presence is more than anything that can count. It's just so important. So, like Father said to me, now's not the time to be telling these parents, oh, it's okay, your children will be going to heaven. Of course they'll go to heaven. But now is the time to just walk with them in their grief and their pain and pray. Pray for them that they'll rebound somehow, some way through this tragedy. That's our calling, right? To walk with those who weep. So what about the balloons? You're wondering about the balloons. So all right, here it is. I brought these balloons because a reminder that in the next few weeks, you might be invited to a graduation or 2, or if you're not, you'll be driving around and you'll see balloons tied to mailboxes. And what's the image? What's the symbol? There's a party going on here, right? A celebration. So the green one represents St. Vincent's School here, and all our kids from St. V's and our Irish heritage, all those Irish people we know and love. I could have brought lots of colors, but the purple one, of course, Barberton Magics. My grandson graduated last week from Barberton, so pray for him. And I got these Hoban guys back there, so next year, if I remember, I'll bring them a blue one, right? It's blue, isn't it? Hoban? Yeah. The red one I'm going to save for last. The white one is Jesus. We all know that celebrations, as I said, have bittersweet meaning. So, today, enter the moment, celebrate with those kids who graduate. It's a bittersweet thing to say goodbye. Now, the white balloon is for Jesus, and Jesus is going up. And I put him on fishing line because there's theological significance here. The fishermen, the apostles were fishermen. Jesus liked fish, so there he goes, ascending into heaven. Men of Galilee, why do you stand there looking up? People of St. Vincent Church, why do you stand there looking up? Our Christ is risen and he is ascended into heaven. So get to work. There's a church to build. There is a mission to accomplish, to spread the good news of Jesus Christ, to weep with those who weep, to celebrate with those who celebrate. And finally, the red balloon. This red balloon is the school colors of Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas.